So, to wrap our minds around the historical context that's in place between the year roughly 1000 and 1200, we actually have to go back for a moment because, of course, history doesn't really obey the law of the calendar. It's not as if everything starts all of a sudden on the year 1000. So, if we go back to our chapter 15, early medieval art, they have a section here, Ottonian Europe. Ottonian because it's named after the grandsons of Charlemagne, a number of whom are named Otto. So the Ottos. So in other words, this is dealing with around the year 900, 843 to 950, a little bit later. In other words, Charlemagne's legacy is very powerfully felt long after his death, culturally and politically. Politically, he had created an empire. The idea that a very strong ruler over a very large territory would be a stabilizing force. And this is a legacy that's being carried on by his descendants, Otto I, Otto II, Otto III, the queens that ruled for them. So importantly, the Ottos defeat the Vikings. The Vikings were the last holdouts who had not fully been Christianized, who were marauders and raiders, and they are finally defeated along with the equally tough Magyars. So this results in peace, and peace permits increased trade and the growth of towns, which leads to economic recovery. This is an important factor in the production of art. And so if we move to the next chapter, 16, Romanesque art, we're going to see that issues of trade and economics are still very important, as well as the political issues being about a multitude of royal dynasties vying for power. It's so important to remember that the landscape, the political landscape of Europe, was much more fractured into small units than what you think of today. So they say it's divided into many small political and economic units ruled by powerful families. So a system of inherited control, kings and queens, among them the Ottonians in Germany. Keep this in mind. The nations we know today did not exist. And then they say, for convenience, we shall use present-day names of countries, which is what everyone does, but it does sort of mislead us. We should be aware that it tends to mislead us because the King of France here is not ruling all of this. The King of France, as they say, is ruling a small area around Paris, known as the Ile-de-France. There's Paris. There's the Ile-de-France. Right in here. That's what the King of France has, because there are rival territories ruled by dukes to the south, to the north. And that's very important in the next chapter, so do make sure that's clear in your mind, where we will see that Gothic cathedrals will be associated with Paris and the Ile-de-France. And they say the southern part of today's France had close linguistic and cultural ties to Spain. So in other words, right in here, there's a cultural blending of what today we think of as separate identities, not separate then. In the north, the Duke of Normandy, heir of the Vikings, and in the east, the Duke of Burgundy. So these dukes are supposed to pay homage to the French king. They're supposed to be his relatives that are under him and honor him and support him, but in reality, that is only token homage. They are, in some ways, we will see, like the Duke of Burgundy in the next couple of chapters, more powerful, more wealthy. And so there are these rivalries. They're hinting about rivalries between competing factions of royal families, royal lineages. And that's important because moving forward, we are going to see those burst out into all-out conflict. In 1066, Duke William II of Normandy invaded England. William the Conqueror. He becomes the country's new king. The Norman nobles replaced the Anglo-Saxon nobility. Now, this may seem tedious, but you're going to watch a video at the end of this model that's actually fascinating and just You can't, it's just completely enthralling. And you will want to know this background because it brings this reality to life. What was at stake in this violence that was behind the hierarchical social system. The society at this time was deeply hierarchical. Peasants, you will see in the video, are essentially slaves. And the nobles, the aristocrats who serve the kings, are both the support system of the king and the rivals to the kings. And the kings are rivals to each other as the Normans conquering England, who choose an alliance with the church. So the church is also a power system. And there's a back and forth of power, a give and take of power between the rulers and the church. And so in their overview of the political situation, they conclude here by noting that two family lines, the Capet family line, Capetians in France, and the Plantagenet line in England, are going to be working in the way Charlemagne was to solidify rule over strong and wide territories to create national states. And this is going to be one of the stories moving forward. But it's not all about family lineages and that kind of direct politics. It's also about the interaction of political, economic, and social life. So one of the points they're making is that towns and cities are growing with artisans and merchants, and they're hinting at something to come. Artisans and merchants aren't aristocrats, they're not nobles, yet they're not exactly peasants either. They're going to be in between. So although the economic base is agriculture, and the aristocrats control the land, the dukes, the kings control the land, that is the source of their power and wealth, even so, there is an expansion of food supplies, there is population growth, and they're kind of hinting there that although there are these complicated court cultures among the aristocrats about how they impress each other and make alliances with each other and then stab each other in the back, that is also going to be somewhat in flux, and even the peasants are going to have moments of resisting their oppression. So I would say this may seem very dry again, but the video is going to make it look, it's going to show you the deep, interesting reality behind these dry words.